Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, brought to you by Music Ally, the show that's fascinated by all the fun and games and finances of the music world. As explained each week by me, Steve Lamack, and him, Stuart Dredge, it's a slightly different episode for you this week, dedicated to live music festivals. They provide us with all kinds of vivid memories, while also giving stages for to everybody from the world's biggest stars to the best of your local bands. But just how difficult is it staging a festival these days? And increasingly, what are the challenges facing festival promoters with a number of cancellations and postponements once again this year? What does the future look like for the UK festival circuits? We went to John Rostron, who is CEO of the Association of Independent Festivals, who I know, well, I've known for a while, since John's days running Soon Festival in Cardiff, but also, of course, now via my role as chair of Live, the live music industry trade body, which AIF is a member of. And because of that, because I didn't want to lead him down certain roads of inquiry or make him feel uncomfortable as I was sitting there scowling at him during the interview if he wasn't holding the company line. So because of all this, we decided it would be better to get a completely fresh perspective on the subject of festivals, which is why, as I quietly recuse myself, Stuart, it's over to you.
Thanks, Steve. And hello, John. Welcome to The Price of Music.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Steve's not here anymore. We can say anything we like about him for the next half an hour. But no, thank you. When Steve and I have been talking about doing this interview for a while, we've had so many questions, I think, because we've both been talking and thinking about the festivals and what's going on. And obviously, we're both veterans of going to festivals. So even after boiling down all the questions, there's a lot to get through today, but I think it's going to be interesting. So thank you. But I guess a good place to start is with you, because you are the CEO of the Association of Independent Festivals. But how did you get to this role? I mean, if it's a Marvel-style origin story, how did you end up what you're doing now?
Well, most of my life, let's do the condensed version. Most of my life, I've been a promoter. Mm-hmm. Started putting on my own nights. I was DJ, putting on club nights, but also then started putting on bands. And I did lots of other jobs along the way, but that's the one that really defines me. I was down in Cardiff. And yeah, that was a big part of what I did. And along the way, one of the things that I did was set up a multi-venue music festival called Soon, which is Welsh for Sound, with my friend Hugh Stevens, which is probably the first time I met Steve Lamack through Hugh. And we put that back on, I think it's 2007 we started. And actually, so that was I'd been a big festival goer, but never run a festival, and that was my way into running a festival. I got a bit disillusioned with music and the music industry, and was moving into some more interested in other areas. I think I was getting more interested in strategy and policy and the things I thought could really make a difference outside of putting shows on. So I sold up what I was doing, I think around 2018, and decided to leave the music industry. And I went off and I learned how to make timber frame buildings, and I learned how to climb trees properly and chop them down, because I'd moved to a rural place. But yeah, found my way back into music, mostly through writing funding bids for people. And that brought me, and then the other thing I was doing as I'd left promoting was I'd set up this thing with a group of promoters that was becoming what is now the Association of Independent Promoters. So I was very interested in those communities of people. And that kept me in touch with the AIF, with Paul Reed, who was here. And I used to have a regular catch up with Paul, and I knew he was leaving. He'd been the first and only manager here. We had a little catch up call, and he said to me, "Why aren't you going for the job, John?" And that was my cue, really. To go, actually, yeah, why don't I go for the job? So I went for the job and I got it. Here I am.
Goodness. And kind of encouraging to know that the head of an industry body also can make timber frame buildings, because when the floods come, that will be useful. But I guess I guess for the people who maybe don't know the AIF and what you do, give us a brief outline of what it was set up and how many festivals you represent, and I guess the kind of work you're doing at the organisation.
Well, AIF started, I know roughly what happened was around about 2008. You had these sort of what we called back then boutique festivals, and now I think we just call them festivals. And you had, I think the instigator was Rob de Bank and his manager friend Ben Turner. Rob was running Bestival, which was probably at quite a size then, but was still an outsider. And he got a few people together. I think there was Field Day. It was run by Tom and some other people in London. I think End of the Road, possibly. I think WOMAD, possibly. There was a number of people, and they got together somewhere in London. And what I heard was that they were sort of rivals, but they knew each other through the music. And they got together and they started chatting about what it was like to put their events on, because these events were growing and getting more and more popular. And they were doing whatever a lot of people do. They had no idea what they were doing. And so they sat in a room and started realizing they had lots more in common than divided them. And they just thought, we need to do that again. And Rob and Ben had a record label, Sunday Best. So they were a member of the Association of Independent Music, which is, the big, who AIM are, looking after all the independent labels in the UK. And a conversation emerged with them to say, I don't know where it came from, but what happened was Alison, who ran AIM, set up, kind of said, AIM can help you set up this group. And she organised, or that team, Claire, Lara, they organised the meetings, secretariat, they helped get people together, and they sort of ushered people into a room 2 or 3 times a year to talk. And that group of festivals grew. And I had my first interaction with AIF then as a young promoter. So back 2011, I saw a poster at a train station with all of these festivals on that I loved. And, it was saying, go to a festival this summer or something, use the train. And there was this AIF badge. And I was like, what's that? And I found out what it was, and I applied and I joined the AIF, and I went to London at some point, and there was maybe 20 people around a table. And there was Rob de Bank, one of my heroes. And there was WOMAD, and there was Kate and Sarah, who ran Tramlines, who really, here's another, they were a multi-venue festival at the time. And I was a multi-venue, and I was thinking about going outdoors, and they were thinking about coming, so I was thinking about coming indoors, they were thinking about going outdoors. So yeah, it was this brilliant group of people. And and that is what AIF sort of still is, really. The core bit for me is those numbers have grown. When Paul left, I've been in the job about 3 years nearly. There was 93 festivals it had grown to. There's now about 152, I think. So a big part of what we do is the same, is sort of getting people in a room, except now they're in a room every day in a WhatsApp group, and they are talking and sharing, and every day they're talking about something. Sometimes it's like, I need some help with this, I've got a problem, or how do you do this, or where do you go for that? And they ask each other questions, and they mostly help each other. And then we listen in on those conversations, and we bring them together at multiple times per year. And through those conversations, we then work out, what are the themes? What's a problem here, or a solution here that maybe they all need training in, or they need a new resource in. So you're kind of constantly listening to what I call stakeholders and trying to work out what they need. But the biggest part of the job now, which was emerged because of COVID, was relations with government. The music sector generally didn't have a relationship much with the live music sector, didn't have much of a relationship with the government prior to COVID. And festivals definitely didn't. And now it's a big part of my working week. Either taking some of these stories to the government, saying, we need your help with this, or the government coming to us as they come to other associations saying, like recently this year, we're going to look at licensing. We're going to do a licensing sprint in 6 weeks. What do you need? And so you've got to quite quickly respond to that, find out what people need, talk to government, get in the room, and as is emerging from that. In fact, I think today, there's a call for evidence to make some huge, sweeping, very positive changes for licensing. And that all happens because there's a trade body you can call, because they can call me. And they wouldn't call 150 different festivals.
I'd love to have that job. So I guess great. And I think one of the things I've known that doing this is, but you do put out research and you put out stats and you tell people how things are going. And I guess that's one of the big topics today. Is we're now in October, so there's still stuff happening, but the summer festival season is done.
Yeah.
What is your take on, I guess, this year's festivals in the UK? What was good? What was challenging? Like, what's the picture of what's happened this year to festivals in the UK?
This is my third year in the job. Coming out my third summer. It's the first year where the sentence has not been, we're worried about sales. This went wrong. That went wrong, and we lost loads of money. The sentence is now a lot more positive. It's a lot of our members sold out or sold more tickets than they've ever sold before, or sold out quicker. They had really, really great events. Like, they just delivered great events, and there's people having the best events, which is a very subjective term, but they just go, that's the best we've ever done. And they've had good spend from customers. So most of the sentence is that, but there's a bit at the end, which is, but we lost some money. So, and that's the hard bit that we're now looking at. So you've got people who sold out, 20,000 people, 30,000 people, lots of people, 20,000 is surprisingly quite amazing how many festivals are actually at 20,000. When I came into the job, I thought there might be half a dozen, and there's so many. But you've got people selling out, but because of the costs, because of how things have changed, they were walking away. Some of them, somebody was on the phone 2 weeks ago, they sold out, they lost £2,000. So you're putting a show on that's costing you between something like £2 to £4 million to put on. And then at the end, and selling out and having a really great time. But then at the end of it, you're losing £2,000. And those numbers don't make sense. And that's a problem, because although people do it for all kinds of reasons, they also need to turn a living, and it needs to be fun. And those things are not happening. So the line's not there for them. The pounds aren't there for them. But then if you're sweating about that, then you're losing the fun, and that's going to make some people stop putting their events on. So that's the bit that we're worried about. But much more positive, in the independent sector. And people for this year coming out, obviously they go on sale straight away, and they're flying again. Bloodstock just sold out on the weekend. Already 40,000 people for next year sold out.
It's interesting, because I suppose I always get kind of confused about how long it is since the COVID lockdowns, because it feels simultaneously an age and yesterday. But I guess at the height of that, people were worried about, well, what's going to happen in the future? Are people going to go out again? So it must be quite exciting and encouraging for everyone that actually they are selling out. People are coming to festivals. That 2-year blip when everyone was locked in their houses, which is overrating a bit. Then in terms of the football, that has come back, I guess.
Yeah. I think this year is the first year where we feel like it's the evidence is there. You mentioned before, I like data and evidence, because you're dealing with lots of festivals and a lot of people, and actually what you do need is the data. Somebody's telling you something. What does the data show? And now the data shows it. Like, you can see they're selling out for the first time. They're selling out earlier than they've ever sold. They're selling more tickets. All of that, is really, really positive. In previous years, they've not had that, but there's also been other things that are caught up in that long tail of COVID and Brexit, so there was a rush out, but there was also, a great example is the festival field maneuvers that sold out, as COVID was about to hit. And so recycled their tickets and kept saying, if you want to sell it, you can sell it. So arrived back in 2022, completely sold out, but a third of the people then didn't turn up, and the festival nearly disappeared. So you had all of these weird things that were going on for a couple of years. Where's Gen Z gone? That's all gone. It's clear people really love festivals, and they're going, and they're and another I don't know what else has changed. Certainly payment plans, which we introduced, hugely because of coming out of COVID, and we were worried about cost of living crisis, but that habit too, the take up on payment plans is enormous. So yeah, people love them. I do look at some other things, and obviously I look at what other trade associations are talking, and keep reading a lot about the demise of nightclubs, and there's a lot of worry and panic about that. And we find that's really hard to read, because what we're seeing in the fields is huge demand for electronic music. So if you were sitting in the world of electronic music, you'd probably be, I don't know, you might be happy that like people are still really wanting to dance. It's just they've moved from inside to outside. That doesn't, unfortunately take away from the horror for the nightclub owners.
Yeah.
But we're seeing that, so hugely popular and the biggest sort of area of growth.
Definitely. I mean, I guess another parallel to what's happening with venues, and we talk a lot about venues closing down and the campaign about that, about how many venues are closed this year, how many are at risk. And I have seen those stats around festivals in the past. There've been concerns about how many were shutting down, how many were never coming back. Have we reached a better place now then? Are you not seeing so many shutdowns or festivals at risk of not coming back next year? Or is that still something you're seeing people concerned about with the costs in there?
I am pretty much not worried about it now, because when I started to roll, somebody said to me, this goes back to the evidence thing. Somebody said to me, there's a lot of festivals seem to be cancelling. And I was new in the job. I was like, well, are there? Like, what's the normal number? And nobody knew what a number was. So I started counting. And we discovered that at least 96 festivals fell during the pandemic. And then in 2023, that first year in the job, 33 fell that year. So we had a number. Because I was going to government saying lots of festivals are cancelling, and they asked me a very sensible question like, well, how many normally cancel? Turned out nobody knew. So we had a number 33. 78 fell in 2024, and that's when I can't remember when, but early spring we were already at the number for 2023. That having that data, having those numbers, being able to say this is the number from last year, this is where we're at now, that was a key moment for us, because then everybody started paying attention, like really paying attention, and some changes in support came for the festival sector on the back of those numbers. This year we're on 42, I think, or 43. Actually, Black Bear's just cancelled, so it's not going to get to the high numbers. We might get to 50. And like I said, I think a lot of people who've gone now really have gone. And you're always going to have some festivals that go. We not only track the cancellations, but we track why. And you will have the rogue promoter. You'll have the person who didn't get their license application in. There was one company this year actually took down, I think, 10 or 11 festivals in one go, one independent company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, okay. 1C. So that's quite extraordinary. That's quite unique. So it's always sad to see festivals go, but I think those worst days are over at the moment. But what I'm worried about is the ones that are trading right now. Will they continue? Like, will they be making the money to continue, or will they be happy enough to continue?
Yeah. Like you say, it sounds like you mentioned the idea of the strain of putting on an event and you only you lose $2,000 at the end. I guess there can be some worry that something maybe in theory be able to carry on going, it sells out. But if the people who are behind it, who are putting all those hours in, are just tired or stressed, then it could stop for that reason, couldn't it? Like the human cost, I guess.
Yeah, and there's festivals, some of the festivals set up to raise money for charities or around a particular cause, and if you're not doing that either, I mean, there's a lovely little example. There's one called Test Fest, which is set up to raise awareness for testicular cancer. So it's not about, ideally it raises money, but also it's about people being in a space and doing things and engaging, particularly men, around testicular cancer. When they're struggling financially to make it all work, the trustees are saying, why are we doing this? Maybe we should just turn up at the supermarket with our banners. And Sue, who runs it, is so passionate about festivals. And she's like, no, because this is so different. You're bringing all the people that wouldn't, you're catching all these people who come to go have a good time, and you're adding this thing to them, and look at the response. So they get so much engagement around their charity. They get so many people who choose to volunteer as a result of being at the festival that they wouldn't get in these other places. And she's had to fight really hard. But she's a classic case. Like, she was going into this year, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying, really worried that they wouldn't get over the line. And then she was messaging. It's one of the loveliest things about the WhatsApp group from the event, going, we just had the best event we've ever had. Now, not necessarily financially, but creatively, as a show, and as to reach their sort of objectives of making people aware about this thing. So, yeah, there's a lot of test fests type people out there, really important to the culture of the UK.
And like you say, that energy is so important for them to go again next year to have that. I mean, something that we've talked about in the podcast quite a lot is one of the other things that feels like it's become a big issue this year, maybe than before, is the whole, I guess, the controversy around politics in certain bookings. So we've talked about Bob Vylan, for example, Murray Wallopers, like events at festivals where a band has either said something on stage at the festival and there's been trouble, or the festival has been told you can't book this artist, otherwise you won't get your license. Is that something? I mean, I know what often happens then is online, because everyone online is just kind of jumping to conclusions. It's the festival promoters often get in the neck. Oh, you cancelled that artist. But I know it's often a much more complicated story. It's not their decision, it's other things. I mean, is that something that you've seen on behalf of your members, that this is something else they have to be aware of, that there's this political discourse around who's playing and what they might have said in the past and what they might say on stage?
I think the lens on things moves all the time, right? So last year there was lots of people looking at Barclays Bank sponsoring all the Live Nation shows, and the lens was very much focused on that. This year it moved to sort of political boycotting around sort of international affairs. Those things will keep moving. And you're touching upon, there was some particular examples. Catherine and Joe ran Radar Festival, were who had Bob Vylan booked. Bob Vylan says something at Glastonbury, which actually was yes, there's procedures at Glastonbury about what you can and can't say, but also it was actually a broadcast issue, because it was the broadcast bit that shouldn't have happened. But they're at the receiving end of huge amounts of quick anger, people's opinions, much like go to a football match and there's 30,000 people who know how to manage the team, but they're getting that with this huge anger. And Catherine has shared this publicly, but she got death threats. And they were getting threats whether if they put them on, and they were getting threats if they took them off. And nobody, for a while, a lot of people just were not actually looking at the detail. What was really warming about that, if I can say that, because there was a horrible thing that happened, was there was a huge community of people who know the festival, or know the artists, or know the people, and knew that it was more nuanced than that. And then there was other people responding and reading articles, and Catherine was writing things or saying things, and they were reading them and saying, no, it's not as simple as that, actually. And they were trying to sort of hold around them. And I thought that was really inspiring. But it didn't stop, of course, some people who just want to have an attack. When you're running a festival, there's all kinds of things to be. That's the point. We're not looking at one particular lens. We're not going, right, let's focus on politics this year or sponsorship next year. There's a 1,000 different things that can blow through. When you're running a festival, you're focused on a number of different things. In the middle of the space, you want to have the best party of whatever it is that you're doing that you've ever seen. And you want it to be the safest party that's ever happened. That's the two things going at once. How can we let people be as free and as wild and as creative and as loose as they want? And people take kids to festivals and they can just let their kids go, right? How do we make that happen? Because we make festivals incredibly safe spaces. So they are the bits that we come out of whatever the conversation is. That's the focus. Is it safe? What are we doing? And are we following the right policies and procedures to do that? And the festival industry broadly, particularly through things like AIF, they're a tight-knit community who will lean in and help each other, but also learn off each other. What happened that weekend? What do we need to do for next weekend? Is there anything that you've done that we can learn from, that we can change, and trying to help each other along. And that, I have to say broadly, it doesn't matter whether you're independent or not. There's a lot of that happens. 3 years ago, there was a vape spiking incident at Isle of Wight in June, Live Nation event. The whole industry, it felt like, knew about that straight away and was immediately talking about, is this something we should be worried about? What should we do about it? Because that's what we want. We want people to come and have a good time. And fortunately, that was seemed like an isolated incident. So that was that.
Like you say, something happens at one festival, they have to react very quickly, but then everyone else can learn and prepare, I guess. Which brings you into this next thing, and there's no danger of me and Steve doing this, just to warn you ahead. But if we were wanting to start our own festival, we were thinking about just how little we know about what goes into it, what you should be thinking about. And so I was going to kind of pick your brains on the notional basis if I was launching a festival now.
Yeah.
But the kind of process and the pitfalls. And I guess a good place is where do people start? Like, do people often start with, they've identified an underserved place or they've identified an audience, or they just have a site they want to use? Like, what's a good starting point for someone who is thinking, I could put on a festival?
Most people, there's two sort of ways. But there's the sort of, broadly speaking, the corporate way, which we won't talk about, and there's the independent way. And a lot of the independent festivals start with a party. Somebody's having a party about something, a birthday or a tribe of people, or they really want to put, Stroud on the map, whatever it happens to be, right? And that's where the festival starts, because I think about Hidden Notes the other weekend, where, there's something in Stroud with all these amazing artists, got a record label, so there's a community that comes together and wants to have a moment to mark it for some reasons, birthday and anniversary. And then they do it, and it looks and feels a bit like a festival, and then they do it again and it becomes a festival. That's the biggest driver of festivals. And sometimes, there's stories where people go to a festival, whatever it is, and go, oh, wow, that was amazing. I want to do that in, Todmorden or whatever it is, right? So why don't we do that here? And that's the catalyst. Or they stumble up, they've been somewhere, they see a site, and they're like, oh, this would be a great space to have a party. By party, I mean, dancing or live bands or something, or you got people like love trails, you've got a group of people who love running and love music. And so they go to West Wales and they run love trails where you run all day and then you party at night. And that's where most festivals come from.
It sounds like there's a real central, like, you have to have an idea, I guess, an ethos, or not just, I quite fancy putting a festival on. It sounds like all those things, they came from a strong core of people, or a strong idea of a new combination of things.
Yeah, they're absolutely driven by generally a person or a small group of people passionate about something, that want to celebrate it and mark it, right? And that's where they come from. And if you want to run a successful festival, that's what you need to do, right? And actually now that's what those people who are doing well, you double down on that community. There are some people who go, right, I'd like to be a festival promoter, and you start booking bands. Unless you've got a very, very deep wallet, you are going to fail doing that, because you're relying on, you don't have a community to start with. You're hoping for the fans of the band to come along, and then those bands are going to change every year. So what's your community? So it does work for some people, but you tend to see those ones run by the major operators, rather than most of the festivals you go to. You can look and, the tribes of people, whatever those people are. Tribes can be metal, or tribes can be Gloucestershire, like I don't know, like it can be, I set up one that was in Cardiff. It was all about celebrating Cardiff and its city and Wales. That was a big driver for me and Hugh when we set ours up. And I see, when I met Kate and Sarah from Tramlines at the time, that's exactly what they were doing in Sheffield. I was like, oh, I've met these are my people. They're doing exactly what we're trying to do over here. And there's loads of those multi-venue festivals, all done for the same reason: celebrating a scene, celebrating a place.
Yeah,
that's your starting point for you.
And I guess, and this is, again, it's where my knowledge is thing. But I guess one of the things that separates me, a party from festival, is obviously you have to go and get a license for it, which is not. I mean, we could do probably 4 hours, couldn't we, on the licensing ins and outs of running a festival? But that's something where I think people who have never been involved in this would think, well, you just ask the council and say, can I have a festival, please? And they go, yes, of course, that would be marvelous. Licensing is a really important step to get right and to make sure it kind of maintains, isn't it?
Yeah, very much. It goes back to what I was saying. You want to throw a really good party, but it needs to be safe, right? Yeah. And you might promise yourself it's going to be safe, but actually what you need is a set of, an event management plan, a book that you've written that explains how it is going to be safe, which has got things like, if there's lightning, this is what we're going to do. This is our extreme weather plan. If there's, if we're building the site and it's dry all the time, and then suddenly the rain comes down, this is what we're going to do to make sure it's safe. This is our traffic management plan. This is how we're going to get people in and out. And we've identified where the bottlenecks and things will be. That's all the stuff that you do that comes both from people with huge experience of what those things look like and mean. They, when you go to particularly the really big events, you see it at Glastonbury, you see suddenly people turn up in a place where you're walking around, you can't walk anymore. There's people with torches guiding you because they've got this huge management plan, crowd management plan, because they know that, was it this year, Charlie XCX is going to be a big hit, so they're going to move it. So they've thought all of that through. Yes, sometimes they might not work out how popular the band is or whatever, but generally that's what all goes into that license application. Well, you meet with what's called a SAG, a safety advisory group, where and we always find they're a good talking point in festivals, because all of the party element of a festival and the color and the vibes and the wonderful things they do, none of that is discussed in a SAG. In a SAG, it's health and safety and fire and traffic and all the really like important stuff, but you can actually really lose sight of why you're doing it, because you're not talking about all the good times. But all of that stuff is what makes the event safe and what you go back to review. And you go through that process. You have to pay money for a premises license, of course. But then you go through and you get your license and off you go. And you've got your evidence trail to say, for everybody, that you're getting a license with a local authority. The local authority has to answer to questions from people who live there, and if whether it goes right or wrong, so you're just laying all the paperwork out. There's a lot of paperwork, unfortunately, in festivals.
Yeah, sure. And we were talking and saying, like, even down to the minutiae of, like, we were trying to discuss. I wonder how much festivals spend on portaloos. I'm thinking that's a line. Like every festival, when I can tell you exactly how much I spent on portaloos. It was this much. It's in my accounts. Staffing and security, even insurance, which is another area that we could probably do an hour on, but all this stuff has to be put in place and be right. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem, aren't you, on your hands?
Yeah. I mean, somebody joined our membership last year, and in the WhatsApp at some point said, traders asked me for a copy of such and such license, but insurance, sorry, but I don't need that, do I? And immediately the membership was like, yes, you do, right? And they've been running their festival for a number of years without the right insurance. And luckily it got through and now have got it sorted. There's a 2000 Trees, James, who runs 2000 Trees, and Gavin, who runs Damnation, do a podcast. And they did one called The Cost of Festivals, where they came with their spreadsheets. And I can tell you that 2000 Trees at the time, so for his budget for 2025, James gives what he calls Stinky Pete, who does the toilets, £34,000 for toilets, wow. £10,000 for diesel, £10,000 just the diesel that they went through, £50,000 it was on power. £1,000 was like the tables and chairs that you get, like if you're backstage and you just want to sit down somewhere, like if you're a press officer, £1,000 just on that. But the ones that are really interesting, $750,000 on artists. So you have a £2 million festival in terms of costs, 2000 Trees, and $750,000. And then I think the other one that I thought was really interesting, because he was just talking about how much that has grown, as a budget. That's the biggest rise. But over $250,000 on people, staff. I think feeding the people, like the crew and the artists, I think that was maybe £50,000, just to make sure everyone's fed through the week. Water, I can't remember what his water number was. I think it was like 37,000, because they have no water on site. So everything has to be brought in, including all the water. So,
which people don't think about. I think you would think, of course, there'll be water from somewhere there, won't there? You assume there's some kind of a water pipe already on this site, and of course there isn't. You have to.
No, and you get to festivals where you then also have people out testing that water all the time. It's got to make sure that there isn't a contagion in that would harm people. So you've got huge amounts of I've never put on those festivals of scale, and I'm learning so much. And the amount of dedication from those people and the money and the time that goes in to make sure that every little detail of that is as safe as possible, I find incredibly inspiring, actually, to be honest, when you're sitting with those people. It's quite remarkable. And most people go to the festival, and have a really, millions of people go and have a really brilliant time.
I know. Do you know? I want to do a whole podcast about Stinky Pete now. I'm fascinated by, but that's another time. I mean, you mentioned artists. I mean, that's the other thing I guess that I've learned from talking to people who are promoting festivals is just the fascinating timelines of booking artists. Because obviously you have the negotiations happen at certain points where you're booking them in, but often it can be years. These conversations kind of, would you fancy doing this, or we can't do it next year? Talk to me. Sometimes some bookings are like years in the making. Others are quick, and that must be a really. I mean, it strikes me as an amazing job, just saying what would be an amazing lineup of artists for this day. But there's so many wheels spinning, aren't there, to get it right and to get the people you want.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've again never personally had I booked a small festival. I could pick things and work with Hugh. I loved, and one of my favorite bits was that putting the lineup in an order and imagining what the journey might be for somebody. And I think a lot of festival promoters and bookers, that's what they really love. They have these little routes. But yeah, when you're getting to scale, and by scale it'd be 15,000 capos, so you're getting into a cycle where a year ahead now or more, it's all moved. A long time ago, I remember being in South by Southwest with Ben, who books Green Man. And South by Southwest is about March or April, and Ben didn't have one of his headliners and was quite relaxed. And those days are long gone. You're a year out. But I learned, you learn that there's all the strange things in the music industry. Like if you offer for somebody for a Friday night headliner, you can't offer anybody else while that offer's out. So there's strange games that people have to, and it kind of makes sense in some ways, but also not. And it's strange games that these poor bookers have to play. But sometimes you have a band on your wish list and you just, you've asked about it a number of times, and then the agent will be like, they're going to be around, we can make it happen. What an agent normally says is, we need a bit more money. It's always that way. But yeah, so the whole booking thing has changed. We again, every year we see something different. I've only been in this job 3 years. Last year I saw move again. So people went on sale with their early birds it was a month after in the summer. By the end of November, everybody had if you didn't have your headliners out, right? And some people had their full lineup out. Bloodstock, Kendall Calling had their full lineup out by the end of November. And the second wave of tickets. So tickets used to be on sale all the time. Those days are gone. You have these waves of tickets now. And basically, if you weren't at that point at the end of November, then you were going to struggle in 2025. And also at that point in November, you kind of knew how you were going to do. Once that second wave of that was your marker. And that's moved massively from people used to use the spring to sort of book the rest of their undercard. That's all done now. For a lot of people, it's all done before Christmas.
I mean, the early bird ticket's fascinating too, because again, I feel like that's a relatively recent, well, not necessarily recent they're being offered, but recent in the importance of them and the sheer percentage of sales that are done through early bird tickets, and how, like you say, it's not just, it's a real, can we do this next year? This will tell us if we can or not, I guess.
Yeah, and it's been, I have to say, like one of the most positive trends that's coming out for us. And I think there's probably a couple of things happening. When you book your early bird now, you're quite often just putting a deposit down on a payment plan. So you don't need to find £200 or £300. You need to find £20, £25. So I think that coupled with something else, the magic that's going on. We actually did a survey of members recently, like a couple of weeks ago, saying how many of your tickets do you sell at early birds? And how many do you sell at the second wave in sort of headliners and lineup? And those numbers are all going up for people. So, at the worst examples, they were selling 10% at early birds, but you've got people selling out on early birds. And, you've got people in the 60, 70% of tickets. And that trend all those numbers are going up. And that for a festival is brilliant. And it says a lot of things. It says that when people are there, they've had a great time, suddenly a month later, put a deposit down, they want to go. And I like, how few things in life do you commit to with a year early? Like when there's a wedding, your friend will say there's a wedding in a year. And even that, sometimes you're like, will I go? You might say you're going on holiday and book a week's holiday, but you'd book the time off, but you might not decide where you're going. But festivals, you say, yeah, I'm going to go to end of the road in September 2026, right? Like that is, and very few things have that level of commitment, and that is growing. So those early bird tickets are all on the up, and those, that next wave part has moved forward, and those numbers are all on the up. And then if you're not sold out, then you have what's left, the hard yards, which is what I call the hard yards, which is the hard bit. Then you're trying to get the rest over the line. But yeah, mostly really positive. And it just says that when people are there in the moment, they're like, yeah, I'm up for coming back.
Yeah, and often without a lineup, just you want to go there again. You trust them.
Yeah, early birds is no lineup. It's literally, I'm going to be in Yorkshire for Deershed next July, right? And Ollie probably at that point, he might have booked a band, but you have, and Megan, they might have booked a band, but they haven't told you who it is yet. You just know that you want to go there, I just think it's incredible.
You trust these people. I mean, I guess we talked earlier about your work at the IF and the idea that it is talking to government and sometimes responding to what they're doing, but also going to them. What are your, and again, this could be a long conversation, but what are your big asks at the moment? What do you think could be the things that could really meaningfully help? I mean, you mentioned licensing is something that's happening right now. What other things are kind of are on your agenda to put on the government's agenda?
There's one thing really that we're focusing on now, which is how do we fix that festival that's selling out but losing a little bit of money? Because how do we make that happen? Because we know that those supply costs aren't going to go down, because they're not, and you can only put the tickets up so much, because otherwise you start to make festivals exclusive, and we don't want that. We don't want to look what's going on in some of those concert and stadium tours. We don't want that to happen in festivals. So we've suggested that they create what we've called a music festival tax relief, which is they have creative reliefs. They have an orchestra tax relief, a theatre tax relief. They have some of them in the film industry, which helps basically and it will help start festivals too. So it would give you relief on the music and the creative elements of your festival. So, it's still a big commitment. You still got to make your show happen. You've got to pay for everything, and you've got to get through the year. But when you do your tax return, you get 45% relief on 80% of the eligible expenditure. And that's would make a huge shift on the bottom line. So if you're making money, your tax bill will go down, so you'll make more money. But if you're losing money, you'll get tax credit, right? And it reduces losses. So that's what we're trying to get into. And also then if somebody's sitting there on the side, if you and Steve are like, we really want to put our festival on, it's hard to get in because of the costs. And so if at the end of it, there's going to be a tax relief, it makes it a little bit more, okay, maybe we can do it. Maybe it's worth a go. Still risky, right? Still risky. It's a big role putting a festival on. So it's like opening a shop, but for only 4 days a year and hoping it doesn't rain, which is a terrible business model. But thank goodness that people do it.
Yeah. And I mean, you sold me on that. But alas, well, no, thankfully not positive. But do you feel optimistic that the government is going to listen to this? I mean, like you say, that there's prior examples of them doing this and it working culturally. So are you feeling quite optimistic that they'll be listening to this request?
Well, I've taken some advice off people that know this, and they've said to me that the chances are low, and they rate that as a really good chance.
Okay.
Because we were looking for no VAT or reduced VAT, and they said trying to get VAT on tickets at a lower rate, your chances were zero, right? So you're at low. So we think you're going to have a good shot at this. And actually, if you put yourself, what do the government want? They want growth. And this is going to help people start up festivals. And it's also going to help some of the smaller festivals grow. So if you're doing 10,000 tickets and you're selling out, why would you try and sell more right now? Because you've got to fund all of that. The tax relief would make it, we can try and stretch. Somebody was this year, runs a small 5,000 capacity event, sells out. They'd love to do a second one somewhere else, but they're like, we can't finance it. And as soon as we talked about a tax relief, they were like, that would be enough. We'd be able to go to the banks and make that happen. But they can't roll it on 2 events. So that's that. So and of course it would mitigate the closures. So we go back to the people that are selling out and losing money. If suddenly it's going to work for them, they're going to have a bit of space, a bit of money and enjoy it again. We're going to keep those people in the game. So I took that advice. If low is good, then we're feeling positive.
Yeah. Okay. But I guess, I mean, the final question I had was about positivity, I guess. And just the fact that you sound very optimistic. And because I think if we'd had a conversation 2 years ago, we might have been worrying about a lot of different things, like you said, about what's happening. But it sounds like you're very confident in, I guess, that getting outside even the cost, just getting down to the fact that festivals are selling out, they're growing. Like this idea of people do love going to festivals and they love going to independent festivals. Because I think people do love Glastonbury, they love the big festivals, but the fact they love independent festivals, that's exciting. That for the music industry as well as for the promoters of these events.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time of year to catch me because we've just come out of the summer, and so we've been to lots of festivals, and they're so good. They're so good. And I work in festivals, but I forget what it's like until you start in the, suddenly sort of like approaching the festival. Suddenly you get all of these things come back to you. And you're like, oh, yes, this is what's going to happen. I'm not very good at sort of imagining what it's going to be like, in the party. But as I approach, it's sort of, oh yes. And then they're just so good. They are just so good. And I get to a number of them with the job, and have learned about loads of new festivals. And then I see all of that passion and all that love happening with all of these communities and these mavericks and these strange people. And it's like, wow. And it happens, in the fields. We're in the fields from about May, June to September. But, I'll be going back to Soon Festival in Cardiff next, be back in a multi-venue festival. I've been listening to the bands that Adam, who books it, has picked, and it's like, I'm so excited about so many bands. Yeah. So all of that fills me with joy. And there's other things going on at the moment. There's a big sustainability report that the whole sector's involved in with, Live Nation, AEG, Superstruct, and all the indies, called the Show Must Go On report, which they do every 5 years. And there's if you look at the history of that report, I think this is will be the third iteration. I think I might have got that wrong, but at the start, there was a small group of people who said, I think we should save the planet. Now you've got everybody, it feels, in the industry. It doesn't matter what size player you are, all contributing with into this report, but also on the ground. So they're doing things in the festival, and then they come to meetings and they share what they're doing. Goes back, like, we've tried this baling machine and it reduces the amount of diesel you need in terms of the number of lorries that come, so you can reduce your footprint. And everybody's working with the guy that makes a baling machine, or whatever it happens to be. And that's so inspiring. And they probably will hate me for saying this, but like, what I know some of the people have said is, like, in the summer, if you want to save the planet, the best thing you can do is lock your house up and go to a festival, because it's better for the planet than being at home. And it's like, what a brilliant world if the way to save the planet is go out and have a good time. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, like, I'm bang up for that.
I saw some research recently. I can't remember who did the report, but it was talking about they were surveying fans, attendees of festivals, and it seemed like they were really keen to know what festivals are doing on this front as well.
Yeah,
and they actually, it's a selling point for a festival if you can say this is what we're doing. Like, that's what a number of people want. Which, I mean, we shouldn't get into politics, but there's a pushback against net zero and all these things happening in different parts of the world from very powerful people. But in this area, festivals and music fans, it feels like music fans do care about this, and they want to know that stuff is being done and tried.
And it's not. I agree, and it's the masses against the classes. I just realised the Depeche Mode album there, and that's what's going on. And they're not necessarily just there because they care about the planet. Like, this is they ask about it because it's better.
Yeah.
Like, so when you go, we out here had a no and low bar, which is kind of getting into that space. Right. So instead of demonizing people not drinking, they had this incredibly successful no and low bar, with a huge range of stuff. And it's like, that's what people want, not because for whatever, and it's tastier and better. You've got backstage catering. I know there's somebody who'd got rid of beef at an event, taking it off the menu, and nobody's noticing because what they're being fed is better, tastier. The 60-40 meals backstage, where you reduce the amount of meat in the meal and then you add more protein and plant stuff, but you still serve it up as a chili. People are going, oh, this is delicious, right? If you told them it was like had less meat in, some people would protest, but you don't. You're still getting your lamb this or your chicken that, but it's loads tastier. So there's all of this. You do it because it's just better, and right, it contributes to these other things. But you're quite right. There's coming out of COVID, that was particularly the communications from individuals, particularly younger audiences, overwhelmed festivals. In the old days, it was sort of like they bought their ticket and they turned up, and then they asked questions when they were there. They now ask lots of questions in the build-up, and our festivals weren't ready for that. But they're good questions and they're interesting and they're asking about stuff. And so those lines of communication are really open, and festivals are like, oh, they're just asking, like, where can I get the vegetarian food, or where's the quiet space for me to go, or is there somewhere I can go for a run, right? And they're asking it. And when you hear that 1,000 times, you go, maybe we should have a run club, right? Like, actually, and then they do. And, we out here, they all go for a swim in the lake, so I think all that stuff is hugely positive, and yeah, it's great.
That's great. Well, I mean, thanks so much, because this has been a really positive discussion. And I think honestly, just personally, you've given me at least 7 festivals I need to go and investigate for next year now. But I think same for you. So, look, thank you very much, and good luck with what's going on, the licensing, the lobbying, the tax relief, and hopefully we can have you back on again in the future to talk about how it all went brilliantly and the government did exactly what we wanted, and everyone is doing well.
100%. And AIF's doors are always open for yours and Steve's new festival.
Right, we're getting cracking on the idea. Although if you've heard the podcast before, we have some differences about the bands we might book. So we might split up creatively before it even happens. But so thank you so much, and really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much, John Rostron. I mean, there's so much to take in and digest from all that, which I think we'll come back to next week. But you got a lot of information out of that interview, Stuart. About so many different things as well. I mean, just the juggling acts that promoters have to worry about.
I think so. The fascinating thing for me about this whole world is it's the numbers, of course, but it's the people who do it. It's such a fascinating array of people who the reasons they have putting festivals and the challenges they're dealing with. Like you say, the juggling. It's weird, isn't it? It's weird to say it's a people market because, of course, it is. But that's something that I think that comes across whenever you talk to anyone in that world. That how you have to be a certain kind of, you need a drive, you need to be kind of a little bit crazy often, I think, don't you?
Yes.
But it's a wonderful part of, interest. So I'm glad we got the chance to talk to John in detail about it.
Yeah. Any thoughts that you have yourselves on anything that's been raised over the last half an hour or so? We would love to know. The Price of Music podcast at gmail.com. As I say, thanks again to John. You can find more details of the work of the AIF at www.aif.org.com. We'll be back with a normal show next week, catching up on a couple of weeks worth of news. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening. If you are enjoying what we're doing here, please do help spread the word in whatever way you can, or alternatively you can support us via Patreon. You can become a super fan of the show at patreon.com/the price of music. Alternatively, get in touch via the email, or you can contact us via our socials. Anything you don't understand about how the industry works that you think we might be able to make sense of for you, or any guidance or advice you would like from the professionals, the Price of Music podcast at gmail.com. Take care, everyone. Bye.